flight got unreasonably delayed. So please put your hands together for the esteemed panelists. I'll pass it on to Alka for taking it from here. Thank you.
Great. It's a real privilege to be hosting this panel, and welcome all of you and all of you as well. Being healthcare, I gave Mayur the idea of maybe making everyone stand up and doing a jog or something, and he said, I will be universally hated, so I'm not going to do that, and start with the panel right away. So we've got very little time. It's just 40 minutes. We're going to try and make use of it. I'll start with an open-ended question. We just heard things have changed since 21, but the resilience stays on. So for each of you, what are the 2 or 3 things you're excited about for the next 12 to 18 months, because things change very rapidly? And what are the things you've changed your mind on from the last 12 months? So Pankaj, if you could start.
Sure. I'll make your life easy. I'll just do one. One thing I like. We're all very excited about new age, single specialty companies. We call them internally vertically integrated care delivery models. What I mean by them are companies that are tech-enabled with a tech DNA, that are solving one related disease areas, but one specialty, that are both online and offline, that are doing everything from diagnostics to consults to programs to operations, surgeries, even pharma, even commerce, and really building an omni-channel brand across that specific specialty. So we're excited about that for a couple reasons. The first is that enables you to drive, as an early stage investor, it enables you to drive patient journey completely, your patient experience, your patient outcomes. And then the second and the business reason for it is it helps reduce customer acquisition costs, which is a challenge in healthcare as we all know it. And the second is it helps drive LTV. So super excited about new age, next generation, tech-enabled single specialty businesses. And specific areas within them, we're very interested in pain management, very interested in creating a pediatric brand, very interested in medical weight loss as a specialty. And I think there's large markets of 10x better solutions, as well as large consumer demand in some of these areas where you can create a brand which is bigger than the individual doctor in a way that patients can actually trust and value. So I think that's one area we're excited about, and multiple themes within that. The things where we've changed our mind as an early stage investor, I think the time to invest in horizontal platforms in healthcare for an early stage investor is done. Think about telemedicine, diagnostics, e-pharmacies, employer platforms. They're already winners in that space. There are already losers in that space. And we still see a lot of deal flow in that space, surprisingly, in the early stage. So I think those areas are not exciting to invest. And the second area not exciting to invest is what we call provider tech. So companies building EMR solutions for hospitals, et cetera. We see 200, 250 of them, and there's just no willingness in the market to pay, and lots of challenges scaling up that piece, which sounds intuitive that we should have better operating systems for healthcare, but those companies haven't scaled. So lots of excitement, lots of not excitement. Yeah.
Lessons learned. Thank you. So summarizing, it's single specialty with a twist, and less of horizontal, so more focus. Rahul, for you?
Yeah, so Quadria Capital is a mid to late stage investor, not as exciting as early stage or venture capital. We invest in all the subsectors of healthcare. Not everything changes so soon. in mid to late stage universe, if you may. But yes, we are looking at newer opportunity sectors, sectors which were not appropriate or not apt for mid to late stage investing, large ticket sizes, let's say 5-7 years back. Some of those sectors are becoming more relevant. Uh, some tailwinds due to COVID, some good policy interventions by the government. For example, medical devices and medical consumables. 5-7 years back, that was a sector which couldn't take large checks because the uh, user adoption in India and overseas for Indian medical devices and consumables was still building up. Now we see that maturing. So that's like, for example, one sector which opens up. Uh, Lots of food for thought on health tech or tech-driven healthcare businesses. Some of those businesses have now scaled up significantly, uh, not still generating operating cash flows or profits back into the business, but still scaling up and in the right direction. So we always keep a watch on that. So that is an area where we might look to add investments. But then pretty much it's the same old boring stuff. Find good companies to invest in, try to add value, and prepare them for exit ahead of time.
Is not boring, but for investments, a little bit more stability than early stage, and looking at medical devices much more, and health tech actually beginning to mature, which is very good news for early stage investors. Visha, what about you?
Yeah, thanks, Alka. So at Tata Capital Healthcare Fund, we are a growth capital private equity fund, again dedicated to the healthcare life sciences. So our investment strategy is essentially, across two core themes, what we call as a domestic consumption theme and a competency theme. So within a consumption, essentially companies that generate cash flows from the home market. We like domestic pharmaceuticals. We already have an investment from our latest fund on that. Where we can go about that sector, that space. Within healthcare delivery, we've chosen to back single specialty rather than multi-specialty, and this is more a function of the check size that we write largely, and we feel that we can drive better impact through a single specialty kind of theme. On the med equipment, yes, we haven't found anything very similar to what Rahul said. Here we'd love to play the India indigenization theme, especially on the manufacturing side, and looking for assets on that category. We'd love to play the retail, the pharma distribution theme, and that's something which we are evaluating closely. So that all this comes under the domestic consumption bucket. Coming to competency, which is more like a bottoms-up approach towards investing, where you like a company because of, say, the stickiness to a customer, because of a manufacturing or a technological advantage. I think we've started, in fact, from this fund onwards, we've looked at the health tech space. We've invested in the AI and radiology space, and that's new compared to our fund one. We are looking at pharmaceutical, the API, the global manufacturers. So those are some of the themes that we would love to focus. So broadly continues to be plain vanilla, but at the same time trying to find niche spots within each of these diverse subsegments within the segment.
Thank you for sharing the lens you apply, which is consumption and competency based. It's quite unique. Mayur, I'll move on to you.
Yeah, so Somerset Indus basically has an investment theme which is access to affordable quality healthcare. And I think saying so, a lot of our investments are lower tier impact related investments. And that's a space which we've sort of focused on in most of our investments going so far. We've done about 14, we're doing a couple more right now. But I think the sort of lens has changed over time. I think if I look at 2011 when we started to now, I think different sort of sectors have played out, and we've sort of adjusted our sort of investments to sort of work with that. But I think one of the key themes which we like is the growth in the lower tier markets. I think whether it's hospitals, whether it's medtech, whether it's pharma, we believe that that is the place which will really lead to a big expansion of the market. Indian healthcare market grew about 300 billion in the last 10 years. In the next 5 years, it's expected to go 300 billion. And that is where sort of the lower tier market plays a role. And that is where the payer mechanisms of government, like Ayushman Bharat, etc., they play a big role. And that is where we believe, you know, learning to play with those mechanisms is critical to provide healthcare delivery in those markets. And that is where our hospital groups sort of focus on, and we've constantly done sort of hospital groups over the last 10 years, whether it is Cygnus, whether it is Apex, whether it is now Sterling Hospitals, which focus in the lower tier markets. Similarly, we have a platform called GenWorks, which is a medtech platform, again, focused on lower tier markets. So that's the theme which we sort of build out. Also, I think recently we have sort of moved more into also the pharma space, but the pharma space where Visa said, you know, domestic pharma is one area, but one of the areas which we like is actually the emerging markets area. Indian pharma going and building a similar play in beyond India, I think that is something which we like. Also, I think the whole API space is now coming of age. I think India, because of the China plus one strategy, again, a lot of API, specialty intermediates moving back into the country. I think that is another play which we back. So I think saying so, I think across healthcare we see opportunity. Some sectors have probably taken a little bit more time, and digital health probably is that. But we truly believe that that will be a big player in access going forward. We have a company called Krishna Diagnostics, which built a whole diagnostic platform pretty much based on teleradiology. Without it, you could not have built that platform. So I think that is something which we support. We believe it will come of age. Maybe it will take 2-3 years to scale up, but that's something which we keep sort of on our radar all the time.
Thank you. So it really is growth in the rest beyond the metros, which seems to be a big theme for Somerset. Anurag, I'm going to shift to you, which is quite hopefully the future tech, what's coming in healthcare.
Sure. I think, obviously I bring in a little different perspective than my fellow panelists from the VC domain. So I represent AWS, and I'm basically the principal advisor on AI and ML for startups. So work closely with startups across multiple sectors, but healthcare. So what we're seeing in healthcare is basically, the tech piece is maturing in the sense that the whole aspect from diagnostics, AI-driven diagnostics, radiology you mentioned, the personalized, disease care solutions for the chronic diseases. A lot of, those, I would say, traditional AI, which is maturing. And we also see the ecosystem evolving. I mean, the healthcare VCs, the whole ecosystem is evolving. The governmental ecosystem evolving with NHA, the National Highway Authority, from, getting access to data and so on, right? And the whole exchanges and everything. And besides that, we also see a lot of other access to the prototype sort of access, like, organizations like, Kaho, coming up and providing the startups access to the to deploy in prototyping stages. All the stuff is happening. But one single thing which excites me in particular is the disruption which is getting because of generative AI. Now, and that's also an excitement. That's also a thing which also mentioned. You asked me about what has changed, right? In my what assumptions have we changed? The assumption which has changed in my mind is the velocity in which this development is taking place. I mean, remember, you basically what you see, people are talking about large language models and these foundational models, which is part of the, this whole generative AI landscape, right? I mean, within the first decade, the complexity of these models got increased 32x, and next decade will increase by 1000x. That's another Moore's law coming for you, right? The velocity in which the capability of these models is increasing is humongous. Number one. And that's causing a lot of interesting opportunities, and specifically since we are talking about a healthcare panel here, a lot of opportunities in healthcare, right? Things like, besides, of course, the conversational piece, which is, becoming an AI assistant, which is more conversational in nature for patient care and all that stuff, right? Now, drug research and discovery, and development. I mean, it shaves off the new drug research happening, and it shaves off years on drug research with using generative AI. The foundational research in healthcare, which essentially would be able to the knowledge base, the ability for generative AI sort of, coming in and making hypotheses for you, and you sort of, going and validating, is transforming the way the healthcare would sort of move forward.
I have a follow-up question. Does this come to India, and when? Because many of the ideas you spoke about, discovery and drug discovery, really haven't come to India. Do you think that happening, and when does generative AI really take shape in India?
Oh, it is already happening. I mean, see, generative AI, essentially, the startups coming in this space are three different categories. One are companies who are developing these language models, which are expensive to do. So we haven't seen much of these model generation companies in India. But there are two other elements. One is the infrastructure companies, and third, which is important, are the application companies. We are seeing, these companies mushrooming across domains, from non-health tech domains like videos and all that stuff is happening, right? But even in healthcare, these companies are coming, ability for us to build on existing models, existing generative models, and building application in these domains. I mean, imagine, today healthcare, we talk about the images, right? The radiology images. When we train students, the amount of images available are not very much. Different types of manifestation disease in X-ray images or CT scan images, right? It's a lot of it is all assumption in terms of, oh, it should appear like this. Now, generative AI is able to generate those images for you, synthetically generate those images for you. And these are very low-end applications, can be done very quickly. Now imagine, doctor says, I want to see this particular manifestation of a disease, and generative AI comes up with a CT scan which shows that, a synthetic CT scan, how easy it is to train new doctors, new teachers, and how easy to correlate when you're actually, diagnosing diseases. So this is all happening. It's going to happen as we speak, right?
Yes.
I mean, it's already happening.
No, absolutely. Thank you. I'm sure the healthcare of tomorrow is not going to be anything like the healthcare of today with these technologies.
Absolutely.
Let me go back to the beginning, and each of you has a different vantage point, so I'll dig a little deeper. Pankaj, you spend a lot of time in the US, and one of the things W Health is doing is the India-US collaboration. Where do you see these opportunities come to fruition in India?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think we have the privileged position of investing in India, investing in the US, and also on the India-US corridor. And maybe this is under the radar, not gets spoken about a lot, just like how B2B SaaS firms are doing from India, doing well, globally. I think there's also that shift that we're seeing in healthcare. In fact, the 8 new age health tech unicorns that we keep talking about, 5 of them build products in India and sell them in the US or markets like the US. We used to see 1 or 2 of these companies every quarter, maybe 2 years ago. Today we see 1 or 2 of these every week. So deal flow has increased. These are founders who worked in healthcare in the US or UK, and they're coming back. They understand the market deeply. They're going back with a solution. Using the India-US corridor as an advantage. And there are about 40 to 45 companies that we track that are doing north of $1 million. Sorry, $1 million is a small number for some, it's early stage companies, but are venture backed, and we feel have an interesting story to say, which could be tomorrow's unicorns. And I think that number will go to about 100 in the next 2 years. So it's an emerging field that we're super, super excited about and watching very closely. The kind of companies we see are, mainly healthcare IT. It could be pharma tech, provider tech, payer tech. We see AI companies going from India to the rest of the world. We see, new age care delivery companies go, and then we see D2C brands go from India to the rest of the world. The one space I'm super bullish and excited about is healthcare IT in the US, 60 billion market. Large lack of workforce. And this is something I didn't know, but India has 150,000 engineers that have built product for US companies. It's actually the largest talent pool outside of the US. So we're sitting on a ton of opportunity and looking forward to see 1 or 2 additional really large companies emerge in that space.
Thank you. No, I mean, I totally agree with that. I mean, in addition to being the pharmacy of the world, I think India has already established itself as the IT capital of the world, and if it can go deeper in healthcare, that'll be phenomenal. Rahul, for you, I mean, Quadria has established itself as a regional leader doing healthcare investments. How do you compare and contrast the various geographies in the region relative to India and investing in India?
Bringing back focus to India and Southeast Asia, where we invest, you're talking about, little over 2.5 billion potential patients who have to be serviced locally. So that's where our focus is. Mostly, we also invest in some export-oriented businesses, which are also solving local problems. But bulk of our focus is on solving the healthcare problems of the local population. So between India and Southeast Asia, you're talking about 2.5 billion potential patients. The healthcare challenges and problems remain the same. Relatively poor populations compared to West or anywhere else, who are underinsured and have to pay for healthcare out of own pocket, and which leads to a lot of financial distress when something big strikes, unfortunately. Inadequate government healthcare infrastructure, which we are all aware about. Anyone who can pay doesn't want to go to a government healthcare facility. But things are changing, and now faced with chronic disease burdens. So the problems across the region are similar. India is now a much more evolved healthcare market compared to other Asian developing markets, which are mostly about hospitals and healthcare delivery. India also, as you rightly said, is sort of pharmacy for the world. Now, med device consumables, health tech, some of the spaces Pankaj spoke about, they're also much more evolved in India. So what we are seeing across our portfolio is a greater acceptance from other Asian developing economies, particularly in Southeast Asia, who look up to India as a reliable and approachable partner who they can lean on to learn something more in healthcare. Because see, India has all the capabilities, right? We have the best talent in the region, healthcare talent in the region, across services, which is hospitals, diagnostics, pharma, medtech consumables now, and health tech. Some of these economies are just, sort of across hospitals and maybe a bit more. So we're seeing a lot of opportunity and openness for cross collaboration. We've helped our Indian hospital companies who run oncology centers or gastric sciences centers to go to Southeast Asia, partner with our hospital companies in those regions and help them set up oncology or gastroenterology centers of excellence. So these are some opportunities for Indian companies which are opening up for cross-regional collaboration. Even our pharma companies who are, there's literally very little pharma capability in, except India, China, and other developing Asia. Other Asian regions don't have pharma or med device consumable capabilities. So we're seeing the opportunity for Indian companies to go there and work with those provider businesses or those sort of businesses. So a lot of opportunity for collaboration that we see.
I mean, at one hand you have the US and then you have the Southeast Asia, so this world is our oyster really for India, which is a great place to be. But let me ask you a follow-on question. When it comes to the role of governments, do you see very disparate roles in India versus Southeast Asia?
So see, Indian policy making, I think, is very evolved, and last few years have been really good, very proactive policy decision making from the government. Healthcare has been a sector, I think, even if you go 10, 20 years back, which has been sort of left, at its own by the government. Some confusion. You'll speak, you'll always hear about pharma, med devices, consumables being in the same bucket, which is a challenge for companies and all. But over the last few years, I think government has done enough and, thankfully not done, disservice to the healthcare sector, so which is good, which is a good space to be in. But Indian policy decision making, Indian government support, and some of the things we spoke about, NHA, the med tech stack, which is now hopefully being pushed by the government. It's and PLI schemes which came after COVID, and we see good buoyancy in non-pharma Indian healthcare manufacturing or pharma or med device consumable manufacturing businesses, where some government policies are now supporting local adoption versus imports, complete dependence on imports. So a good space to be in. Southeast Asia also, governments are fairly supportive because see, healthcare is a non-discretionary need. And thankfully governments understand that. Mostly in the region now, governments are moving away from being providers of healthcare to being payers or funders, which is again a good space to be in because we believe that private talent, entrepreneurial talent in the entire region is phenomenal. And if there is correct policy action and the payer route is sorted, I think private sector has all the capability to serve on all aspects of healthcare and do it well.
So it's a good job for the government.
Yes.
Visha, actually, we all know that healthcare and impact go hand in hand. And we were having a very interesting discussion on the kind of impact you guys are looking to create, both in terms of employment, economic, and social, and of course, healthcare, literally dealing with life and death. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
See, I would say when you look at impact, let's first look at from a 30,000 feet at the macro level on the healthcare side. I think there is a tremendous need to address challenges of healthcare in the country across the 2Ds, I would call it as demographics and disease, right? On the disease side, today clearly India has, is suffering from a triple disease burden, not just a chronic and infection, but also a post-pandemic disease burden. On the demographic side, one very simple example, like, there are 130 million people above the age of 60 today. And there is no institutionalized care being provided for this, or there is no institutionalized mechanism to address the care needs of this, right? So clearly, I think, and all this is I would say, the genesis of how we as funds can create, investment strategies to deliver impact on this. So for us as Tata Capital Healthcare Fund, yes, we've, apart from, doing an ESG requirement on the diligence, we also have taken impact targets. We have specifically taken impact targets with respect to SDG Goal 3, which is health and well-being. And we have committed to two very core tangible targets, which is a double-digit growth in health beneficiaries, that's number one. And number two, for in terms of job creation, for every $1 million that we invest in a portfolio company, we've committed that we will create so many jobs, right? So these are two. But behind these two impact targets are running about 15 to 20 KPIs, that cuts across, I would say, like what he said about tier 2, tier 3, what are the geographies that we are covering, what is the kind of population that we are covering, what is the disease burden that we are addressing. So that's how we are going about with respect to impact. If I have to speak something very specific with respect to the 5 companies that we have looked at, how does that percolate across our investments? We have invested in 2 diagnostic assets, 2 regional diagnostic assets, and both of them are addressing the impact through reach and accessibility. And that's, I would say, a general theme across diagnostics, because diagnostics is not yet very well penetrated across the country. We've addressed in a chain of cancer clinics, especially on the medical oncology side, and cancer and itself is a huge unmet medical need, right? Addressing the needs of cancer. We're looking at impact again through, our investment in the health tech company, Deep Tech, which is addressing the I would say reading scans, radiology scans, be it X-rays, MRI, CT scans, etc., to help improve radiologist productivity across the world. So it's not just an India story, it's also a global story. So that's the way we are trying to bring about impact in a very slow way, or I would say in a very gradual, in a very small way. But hopefully all of that will count to creating a bigger impact.
Thank you. To more impact. Mayur, I believe you're one of the earliest healthcare-focused funds. So you've seen the journey for 12 or 13 years. Tell us a little bit about how healthcare investing has evolved over that decade, if you could shed some light there.
Yeah, I think healthcare investing has sort of evolved in terms of the sectors which sort of have gained importance. If you say 10 years ago, probably it was hospitals which were big. In fact, single specialty was big at that point. Then medtech sort of gained sort of prominence. I think pharma for quite some time really did not require private equity because they were fairly profitable. But ever since you had the US FDA issues, etc., pharma really needed better sort of investment in capex to support growth. I think pharma came of age, and now you're seeing things like API coming of age. Diagnostics, I think, really took a big upswing when COVID came into play. And I think even areas like molecular diagnostics, I mean, RT-PCR is something which we all know now. I think before COVID, nobody knew what it was. And we never thought that we would even have a few machines in India. So I think not just healthcare sectors, but even subsectors of healthcare have sort of picked out. And the reason why I mentioned that, in the next 5 years, we will see a huge growth is because every subsector of healthcare, I mean, in pharma, if you say it is domestic pharma, it is emerging markets, it is regulated markets, it is API, it is pharma ancillaries, all are moving in the right direction. Similarly, diagnostics, if you pick, I mean, today, it's saying that, it's pathology, radiology, B2C, B2B, B2G, you name it. Everything is sort of, again, advanced diagnostic. Everything seems to be moving at the same time. So this is a great time to really invest in pharma. So I think that is where we see the real growth thing. The only thing which I always say is, we don't believe that one player will rule the market. I think that is something which we keep hearing, that I want to be the largest. Gentlemen, I think, let's take pharma. We have 300 companies in pharma, branded generics in India, which control 80% of the market. And then there are another 10,000 who probably do the next 20%. And they all coexist. We see similar things happening in diagnostics now. You will see probably in the next 5 years, another 100 diagnostic companies, probably around the 500 crore levels. So you are going to see a huge expansion of the market with many players. And so there's this huge opportunity coming. I mean, you will have people coming from lower tier markets, people coming from the advanced specialty areas, but they will all build large sort of businesses in this space. That's the opportunity which we want to go after.
Great. I know the things flashing times up, which is, just talks about the vastness of the sector we've had. I would have loved to talk to you about data privacy and some of those issues, but because of time, we'll probably need to call it a day. We've discussed a little bit of history, we've discussed a little bit of the future, the impact, technology, profitability. So there's so much to be excited about healthcare. And we are so glad that many of you joined us to listen to the panelists here. Let's give them a big round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you.